John Henry Battison, a broadcast engineer whose achievements and service span more than 7 decades, died August 28, 2012 in his Loudonville, Ohio home. He was 96. Many here know John as the founder and first president of the Society of Broadcast Engineers. I know him as my friend. John was born in Wembley, England on September 11, 1915 and grew up in London. It was there at an early age that he began his lifelong interest in broadcasting and electronics. In his youth, he built a mechanical television receiver to view John Logie Baird's 30-line images being transmitted then by the BBC. John recalled his fascination with receiving these early television transmissions frequently resulted in him missing school. In an interview, John said, "I was quite often too ill to attend school on those days when the television broadcasts took place." John was also an active ham in his youth. His call sign in England was G2AMC, and in 1931 he built his own 180-meter rig. When he moved to America, he held the call sign W8KUC. After completing his early education, John joined the research staff of Echo, a pioneer UK radio and television manufacturing firm, and remained with the company until England became caught up in World War II. John's interests also included aviation, and for 6.5 years, he helped defend his homeland as an RAF fighter and bomber pilot. Following the war, John decided to seek a career in American broadcasting. He immigrated in 1945. He was initially employed at KMBC in Kansas City and later moved to CBS Television, where he worked with Dr. Peter Goldmark in that network's color television development program. In 1955, John elected to launch his own television station and moved to New Mexico to establish KAVE-TV in Carlsbad. John constructed the station and operated it in concert with Cave Radio. In addition to engineering duties, he frequently appeared on camera and behind the microphone at both operations. Later, John was employed by the American Broadcasting Company. He helped plan and design a number of that network's owned and operated radio and television stations. He interrupted his U.S. career in 1968 to travel to Saudi Arabia, where he served as the chief engineer of Saudi television. He later returned to the United States, where he became director of engineering at Ohio State University's Broadcast Center. In his career, John held several management and engineering positions. He was the Director of Engineering and General Manager of CHC-TTV in Calgary, Alberta. He became Director of Television, produced Burl Ives on the ABC network, and produced 2 weekly shows on Dumont, CBS, and NBC. Part of John's career was spent as an engineering consultant with a client list that included the American University, the governments of both Lebanon and Uganda, and the governor of New Mexico. John was also Director of Education for the National Radio Institute in Washington, D.C., and lectured at the Peking Institute in Broadcasting and China as the official guest of the government. He was a consultant for Bing Crosby, owner of KCOP-TV in Los Angeles from 1961 until he left for Saudi Arabia in 1968. With all his hard work, it's no surprise he received several awards and recognitions. John was nominated as a commissioner to the FCC in 1961 and 1973 by Senator Joseph M. Montoya. He was appointed Colonel Aide-de-Camp to Governor Sims of New Mexico. John's listed in Who's Who in America. Known in broadcasting circles as the authority on directional transmitting antennas, he taught at 5 of the 6 special directional antenna seminars given by the NAB. In March of 1980, he became a U.S. member of the FCC delegation attending the Region 2 Medium Wave World Administrative Radio Conference in Buenos Aires. In 1979, he was selected to travel to Moscow as the U.S. delegate at the Popov Conference. John has become best remembered for initiating a movement that led to the creation of the Society of Broadcast Engineers. John had been active in the Institute of Radio Engineers since 1941 and had served on several committees. He was not pleased with the decision made in the early 1960s to merge the IRE with the American Institute of Electrical Engineers, and he was unhappy with the direction of the group. That was John's call to action. He wrote an editorial in Broadcast Engineering in December 1961, encouraging the creation of a new organization to represent the interests of broadcast engineers. He had no idea if the industry would be interested in forming such an organization, but he offered the challenge anyway. Quoting John from his December 1961 article, "Possibly a new institute is needed for broadcast engineers, one started in just the same way as the IRE was originally. Perhaps it should be called the IBE, Institute of Broadcast Engineers, and be presided over by one of the great broadcast engineers of a few years ago. How many years is it since a broadcast engineer was president of the IRE?" John received 32 letters from that plea. That was enough to show him there was indeed interest. In 1963, though, after no one volunteered to move this idea forward, John made time to take it on himself, despite many other activities and commitments. With the help of his family, he sent membership invitation letters to nearly 5,000 radio and television chief engineers. His actions led to the founding of the Society of Broadcast Engineers, with John becoming its first member. John published several of the letters in the following months to draw support. Unfortunately for John, but perhaps fortunately for us, no one stepped forward after 2 years, so John took it upon himself to get things rolling. He ran a membership application in the April 1963 issue of Broadcast Engineering. Some applications came through, and in late 1963, John and several engineers in Binghamton, New York, gathered informally. There it was decided to hold a formal meeting at the upcoming 1964 NAB convention in Chicago. The first order of business, change the name. There was concern that the Institute of Broadcast Engineers, the IBE, would be confused with the IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. There was also concern the news broadcast group would be confused as being a union. The name was changed to the Society of Broadcast Engineers. A steering committee was formed with John as the president, and a formal slate of officers was elected at the 1965 NAB convention, where John was elected president. In the early days, John devoted much of his time to creating the SPE Journal, which was his first love. The IRE published proceedings, and John felt the content was too high level for station engineers. The SPE Journal was his answer. John funded the first few issues out of his own pocket, but sustaining member dues and the first advertisement from Electro-Voice provided the revenue to fund the journal after those first issues. John authored 15 technical books and wrote more than 500 technical articles for publication. He also served as technical editor for Radio Magazine and was a frequent contributor to Broadcast Engineering Magazine. In 1998, John received the National Association of Broadcasters Engineering Achievement Award, and in 2006, he received the Society of Broadcast Engineers Lifetime Achievement Award. That award was renamed in his honor in 2011 to be called the SPE John H. Battison Award for Lifetime Achievement. On what would have been his 97th birthday, the Ennis Educational Trust created the John H. Battison SPE Founders Scholarship in John's honor. John remained active in broadcast engineering activities until the time of his death. He was also an ordained Anglican priest and traveled 160 miles each weekend from his home in Loudonville, Ohio, to conduct services at Christ Church in Columbus, Ohio. John accomplished a great deal in his life. In his NAB Engineering Achievement Award speech, John said, "Radio engineering's advances from 1945 through 1998 have been fantastic. Someone will say, he's forgotten whatever. I apologize, too many things have happened to cover them all." I'll repeat that as well. There's more I could say about my friend and colleague John Battison, but too much has happened to cover it all. I will close with this. John was an RF engineer at heart, but he knew audio as well. I thought we worked well together because I'm an audio engineer who knows something about RF. John had a favorite phrase that summed it all up. When discussing broadcasting and RF modulation, John would often say, "Audio is something that messes up a nice clean carrier." Rest well, my friend.